folks, this is Meredith from the Paper Craftery. Today I am sharing a very fun tutorial. We're going to be making a seahorse with this template that I have available for you on my website. I will link to that in the description box below the video. It is a little bit big. It's a full-size sheet of paper, so you might need to cut off the top and the bottom, and that's okay. I'm going to be making mine out of 5 different colored strips in the purple and pink family, where I'm going to make sort of an ombre belly to our seahorse. So I have my main color here, which is kind of a grapish purple, and then I'm going to get a little bit lighter. I have an orchid, and then I have kind of a pinkish, like a light fuchsia, a pale pink, and then white. I'm going to be using a little bit of the last 4 colors, but my main part of my seahorse is going to be that darker grape color. And we're also going to be making an eye on our seahorse. You're going to need a little bit of black paper. And then the rest of your supplies are pretty standard. You are going to need a work board with some wax paper on top. And I would recommend using a needle tool for this as opposed to a slotted tool. You will also need some glue, a small paintbrush, and some scissors, and also some straight pins to keep everything together as you're building. I will be going over at the end how to mount this seahorse, so get whatever backing board you like. I'm using a 5x7 piece of a mat board that's been pre-cut. So to start with, after you print out your seahorse and you cut it down if needed, however big your work board will allow, you're going to slide that under a piece of wax paper and pin the corners. And this is what we're going to be building our seahorse on. This is not our final mounting surface, so it's okay that there's going to be pinholes in this. It's okay that there's going to be pinholes in the template. This is like a one-use thing. You can print it out as many times as you need to, but don't worry about any pinholes from this point on. The first thing we're going to do is start with what I think is the most difficult part of the seahorse, and that is making most of the tail and the belly portion. To do that, we are going to be making a big coiled swirl, and we're going to be using that and kind of molding it around the template. If you haven't seen my swirl video, I'm going to link to that. It's definitely a must-watch because I'm not going to go through a ton of steps about making them, but I will be making one here. But if you haven't done swirls a lot, you're not super familiar, maybe you're more of a beginning quiller, take a look at that first. This is maybe more of an intermediate step. I haven't really, I don't think, done another project that's been this involved on my channel just yet. We're kind of pushing the envelope a little bit here. So anyway, what I've done so far is I have stacked my 5 different colored strips in order from darkest to lightest. And I did a torn edge. A torn edge is always going to give you a smoother result, and that is very true when you're trying to make a swirl as well. So after I tear all the ends off, I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue between each of the 5 strips, a very, very small amount, just a little dot, 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 and then push those back together, make sure everything is lined up nice and tight and smooth. And then I can start rolling it on my tool. Now for this design, I like the palest color to be on the inside. So as I roll, you can see that white color is on the inside of the swirl, and then it goes all the way up to the darkest purple. Skipped ahead here, and this is where I made a bit of a mistake that's going to come back and bite me later. I definitely rolled too much of this coil on this swirl. I didn't need to go all the way to the end like I did there, and what that's going to do is just make this a little bit more unruly as I try to work with it, because I don't need all of it in a swirl. See here, I'm kind of fighting the fact that it's so curly now, because I really only need a little bit. So bear with me here while I fight my paper and get it out of my way. All right, so this is about what you want to have happen. You can see now I have just a small swirl on the end. I want to keep that and line it up on the tail. There's more of a point on the tail than what you're going to be having on your swirl, and that's okay. It's going to look more or less the same size is what you're looking for, but you don't have to worry about it being in a pointy shape. And you're going to mold the rest so it fits the rest of the tail going towards the belly. So to get started with that, cruise in a little bit here, a little bit easier to say. To get started with that, I'm going to take a pin and go right through the eye of my swirl. I want to keep that in place. If you want to put a dot of glue under there, you're welcome to. I did not do that for this time, but I have definitely done it in the past. And now I'm taking all 5 of my strips, keeping them together still, and then I'm going to join them over where I want this whole thing I'm going to mold to be finished, which is right about here. That's going to stay together. And then everything between those two is where I'm going to start spreading out my strips. And just like when you're making any kind of swirl, it's the same process here. I'm going to pull and push each individual strip until I get it exactly where I want it. The first thing I did, I moved the white one, because remember that's going to be on the inside of the swirl. And I got that right on the line of the template. Now, next thing I did, I moved the light pink, and I got that where I wanted it. And then I'm going to be using just a couple of pins to make sure they stay in place. I'm going to move a little bit faster here because I don't want this video to be 2 hours long. But this is me just pushing and pulling and getting my strips exactly where I want them. I want them sort of even, and I want them to fill that entire section of the tail. If you decide you want yours to be the entire tail, by all means. My projects are always just an idea point. You go crazy and make this your own. But I wanted to show a different way to use a swirl with this project and how to use it to fill out a section of a template. So at this point, I am pretty happy with how I've spread out my swirl, but I need it to stay like that. So in order to do that, I go back to where I had pinned my strips to keep them together on the end, and I just put a tiny dot of glue where they all meet back up again between those 2 pins, the white pin and the green pin. Pinch that together for a little bit and let that dry. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the rest of that paper from the swirl and use it to fill in this belly section. To start with, I am putting small dots of glue along the edge of where I want this first strip to lie. And I'm going to use some pins to gently guide it into place. This is the white strip. It's just going to go up and around the belly, using pins on either side of the strip to get it to be exactly where I want it to be. And it's going to go up and around the belly and under the neck and kind of to the bottom of the snout. I don't know what you call that on a seahorse. The bottom of the head there, right at the end of the neck. I probably should have looked up seahorse anatomy before I started talking like I know what I'm saying. Right about here is where I want it to end. Oops, fix that. There we go. And okay. Right about here is where I want it to end. And I'm going to, even though I say I hardly ever do this, it's hard to rip something once it's in place like that. So sometimes you have to cut. It will be okay. Pin that in place, and now I'm ready to mold the other 4 strips, and they're going to keep going in the same direction, but they're going to get a little bit less curved as they go. So I want it to look sort of like this, where it's not completely separate. It's going to be touching on either end, right there where I put the glue, and right there, and then just be a little bit more open in the center. Again, a little bit of glue on the next one on either side. Mold that in a little bit. Sometimes you have to use your needle tool where your fingers don't fit. Pin the end. And just keep moving on. And even though you're using glue, you're going to have a few seconds to move these around if you need to. So don't panic that once you put a little bit of glue in, you don't have any wiggle room. You will, you'll have a few seconds. At this point, I have gotten the purple more or less where I want it. Almost straight here on the belly, but not quite. And at this point now I can go ahead and snip off the rest of these papers. I don't need any of these anymore to avoid having a really blunt line at the end of this, so I can get this part to blend in when I'm adding on the rest of the outline. I'm going to make them increasingly smaller and just kind of stagger my cuts. So the one right after the white one's a little bit shorter, then the next one was a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter. That's just going to make it blend a little bit easier. Like I said, when we're moving on to do the rest. A little bit of glue between everybody, and ooh, throwing pins. Pin that into place, and then we can move on to the rest of the outline. Next thing we're going to do is the rest of the outline, and this is going to be done with the same color that we had as the main color of the Seahorse. That's going to be that darkest purple, and I'm going to need to make these a little bit thicker, a little bit stronger, so we're going to be using our double strips. If you haven't seen my on edge quilling video, that goes into a lot of detail about how and why I make these double thick strips, but essentially it's just folding a long strip in half, adding glue all the way down, and then squeezing it back together again. Once the glue dries, it's going to be really thick and sturdy, and you're going to be able to mold it really easily. If you haven't watched that video, I will link to that down below in the description box as well. So after that strip is dry, I actually ended up making 2 of them because I'm going to need this and a little bit extra. I tore off the end to give it another torn edge, make it easier to blend this strip in. And now I'm just kind of softening it a little bit, running it through my fingernails just to relax the glue a little bit. It's going to make it easier to go around all the ins and outs of the rest of the template. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to add a tiny drop of glue right where the swirl that we made meets the bottom of the template. And then we're going to start going around the edge. This entire rest of the outline is going to be made in the same way with this double thick strip of the darkest purple. I'm using a combination of pins and glue. I am going to get it exactly where I want it. This project, don't be afraid of using pins. You're going to need a whole heck of a lot of them. It again is okay. These pins will not show up in your final work because you're not going to be using the wax paper or the template at all. We're just using this process to make the shapes we want with our paper, and then we're going to be taking it off later. I'm going to show all that, so don't worry about that. But I know there's a lot of quillers out there who use cardstock and thicker paper and don't use pins at all, and that is awesome. This is just the way that I prefer to do it. I find it easier. It's a little bit easier to make mistakes and correct them. Anyway, we're going to keep going around the edge of the Seahorse in the same way, using a combination of pins and glue, bending the strips around the pins when you get to the sharp corners. This is going to be another sharp corner here. I put a pin right in there and then give it a good pinch. That's what's going to get it moving in the other direction. So I get a nice smooth curve around this first bump here. A couple dots of glue, 2 pins, another pin in the corner, and another good pinch. And that's pretty much the same kind of maneuvers you're going to be doing. Like I said, a whole bunch of pins here. 2 on the curves, and then 1 on the peak of the corner. And we're going to go all the way around until we get to that snout. This is the point where I have run out of this strip, and that is okay. I had, like I said earlier, I made 2 of these just to be on the safe side, and I tore my paper right where it met one of the corners so that it can get sort of a smooth transition, and you're not even going to see it. When I line up the next one, give a little bit of curve to soften it up. I'm going to meet it right there. I even gave it a little bit of an anchor just to give it a foot to stand on there by bending a little tiny piece and gluing that on. That's an optional thing. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. It'll still blend if you get it to meet right at the corner, and then keep going. When you get back to the snout, you'll have a little bit less places to really bend it because it's a lot straighter here. So just keep those pins handy and just keep working around until you get to the bottom, and then we have to worry about blending in this purple strip with all of those pieces that we used to make the swirl earlier. So at some point your pins start to kind of get in the way, so you might have to get rid of some, like some of these ones on the swirl here, all that's already dried. So get rid of any extra paper, and then you can start getting rid of these pins out of here. Just get in the way sometimes once they're not needed anymore. And I use, again, my needle tool because my fingers won't fit in that little area. Okay, get all that in there, blend it in. You won't really even be able to see it under there. At this point, you should be able to see the outline of your seahorse pretty clearly. Next thing you're going to do is work on this little wing type section. Maybe it's a fin, it's this little thing that flutters along when they're swimming, and that's going to be right in the middle of the belly section. And for this one, I'm going to be using 4 strips this time. I cut out, I think, the palest pink color. So I went from dark purple to light purple, and then to that fuchsia and some white. And this is going to be sort of a layered heart type shape. I took about 3 or 4 inches of the dark purple color, folded it in half, and then I'm making 2 scrolls inward. So there's kind of half the heart shape. And then I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. Roll it into the center again. These all have names. It's been a while since I've worked with the names though. Are they V scrolls? And I have a post on these at some point. I'll try to remember to link to that one as well. There you go. That's about the shape you're looking for. And you can always keep lining this up and measuring it before you glue. But I've done this a number of times, so I kind of know what I'm looking for at this point. So that's going to be your first layer. It's a good idea to pop a couple pins right through the eyes there. Keep that where you'd like it. And next thing we're going to do is move on to the lighter purple color. And this one is going to be another V, but we're not going to curl the ends. I'm just going to take a small strip, what I think is about the right size, and ended up being a little big. Tear off some, and what that's going to do is just tuck it in around the scrolls that you made. So I'm going to glue it right in the center, and then the two ends are just going to touch the scrolls. And then we're going to do the same thing with the fuchsia color, and it's just going to be a little bit smaller. But we're going to measure out a small V and add a little bit of glue, and then tuck it in there so it meets again the two purple scrolls. Lastly, we're going to add a little bit of a white detail. This is going to be another of a V scroll, but with a little bit offset. So one side is going to be a little bit larger than the other. Something like that. And another dot of glue, tuck it in there. And it's just a very simple detail. Yours doesn't look exactly like this. It's not a problem. The rest of this project is going to be pretty loosey-goosey. That's kind of what you're looking for, just to bring back those different colors again. That's really the whole main point of that part. All right, real quick, we're going to make the eye for your seahorse. I have about 4 inches of black quilling paper. Roll that end to end into a coil. Let it open up just a teensy bit. And add a dot of glue. Once you get your glue to set, give your coil just a little tiny little squeeze. So you get more of an oval shape than a circle. And we're also going to use a little bit of that main color, in this case the darkest purple, to make what's going to be kind of act as like an eyelid, for lack of a better term, around this eyeball. Just have it make sense instead of just a big black dot sitting in the middle of your seahorse. So all I do for that is just make a small scroll by making a little bit of a couple turns on one end and softening up the paper with a curve. Just make a C-scroll and just tuck it around the eye. This one was giving me a little bit of grief, so I had to kind of wrestle with it for a minute. But you want kind of the curl to go on top and then just tuck underneath. Like I said, just give the impression of an eyelid. Something like that. And on my design of the seahorse, this eyelid, the eye, sorry, isn't going to connect to anything. It's going to be kind of floating in negative space. So I'm just going to put a pin in it and just kind of get it around where I want it and leave that be. We're not going to touch that one again. For the rest of this design, it is a little bit more freeform, little individual preference kind of situation here. So there is not going to be any real step-by-step detail. I'm just kind of filling this in as I go. I had a main idea of how I've always done it. I ended up completely changing the tail to a new design and made it up as I went along. Partly because everybody has their own individual style. The main point of this video was to show how I made the swirl and formed it to fill up some space in the template. And then, so the piece wasn't super heavy. The rest of this is going to be really open and airy with just a few pieces. Some people don't like that look. Some people want to fill it in a whole bunch. And that is just fine. There are a million different styles in quilling. My style is just a little bit more negative space. So all I'm doing is making some scrolls, making some straighter lines, and just measuring them, tearing off any excess, getting rid of any extra glue, using pins just giving kind of the same look that I created with the swirl, but this time it's all going to be with that purple. Can't forget about the snout. I'm just calling it a snout now. I really don't know. If somebody knows, please leave it in the comments what you actually call the nose of a seahorse. I made a little S-scroll and tucked it in there just to fill in that space, but still keeping it light. I'm going to focus on this bottom part here on the other side of the tail, going for, like I said, kind of recreated this on the fly here. I had been making it one way for a really long time. I actually used to sell these in my Etsy store when that was open a few years ago. I sold a bunch of this same design, these seahorses in different colors, and I had a different way of doing the tail, and I never really liked it, but it was sort of a if it's not broke, don't fix it situation. I just kept kind of doing the same thing even though I wasn't super thrilled with it. But I figured for this video, while I had the template out and I was going to be playing around, I should maybe try something new, and I'm actually really happy with it. Once it all gets finished, you'll be able to see, but it makes a lot more sense. It kind of echoes the same shapes that I was making, and it just worked a lot better. So, moral of the story, don't be afraid to make a change. Keep going in the same way here, adding, subtracting, figuring out, like I said, as I go, until it gets filled up in the way that I like it. Have our last piece going in, and there we have a quilled seahorse. Right, don't go away now because we're going to talk about how to mount a quilling. I had a couple questions about this last week, so I figured why not extend this video and go over just a few things about mounting quilling onto a backing. So first thing you gotta do is gently take out all of your pins. I like to give mine a little bit of a turn, a little wiggle as they come out. I find that helps them not get stuck in any glue and pull paper with it. That's no fun after you did all this work to snag your quilling on your pins. And get your eyeball out of there. We're gonna go back to that later. And take a quilling tool, your needle tool again, because that's really nice and thin, and we're just going to slide it between the quilling and the wax paper. It should come up very smoothly. It'll stick here and there when it hits the glue, but with a little bit of a wiggle, it should pop off. And I always get questions about, is wax paper really necessary? Can I use parchment or some other type of paper? Really, you need the slick surface of the wax paper. Parchment paper I know people have some luck with it. I've never had luck with it. I always find it to not be the right surface. If you use like a clear sheet protector, that will work. Some people even use like saran wrap or plastic wrap, but that can get a little bit wrinkly. But you need something that's really smooth, or else your glue will stick. You probably will have, I should say, you will have some dots of glue on your underside that you may want to get rid of. If you're using a white paper, you don't see them too much, but I definitely take the time and snip them very carefully from the underside. And then you'll want to grab your glue bottle and just do some dots of glue. You want to try to get all the sections. You don't need to cover it with glue. Quilling is very light. You don't need a ton of glue to get it to stay anywhere. But I would try to get every piece of the swirl specifically. A few dots on each layer is a good idea. A little bit on the wing, a little bit on the collar here, and the snout, and all the pieces. You can see I'm not going crazy. I'm not dousing it in glue. Just want to make sure that I get all my layers to stay. And then there are ways to measure this and make sure you get it completely centered. For the sake of this project, I did not do that. I just kind of eyeballed it and hoped for the best. But I have my tweezers holding onto a sturdy part, and that actually turned out really well. Done this a few times. But I do have an old post about how to measure and get your quilling to get set in the center of what you're mounting to. So I will link to that as well. Some people might find some helpful tips in there. But one thing I want to mention is you may find a need, like I'm doing here, just to slightly adjust your curl and the layers of your swirl and make sure that everything is going to dry where you want it to dry. And then you also may want to use use your paintbrush to get rid of all the dots of glue that you might see around your lines. And then don't forget to put your eye back in, because this guy is floating independently without being attached to any of the other quilling. All I have to do is put a dot of glue right on the mat board where I want it to stay. And mat board is nice and sturdy, and so is paper, so you can layer something on top of it if you want it to set very evenly. You can just use your hand if you want to, but what we're looking for is a nice, even, dry all the way around. We don't want anything to pop up and be unlevel, so putting a flat surface on top is probably a good idea. Here is a few that I had left over. The purple one we just made is in the center, and I have a coral with different shades of pink on one side and then the orange on the other. You can do these any color you want. I just really like that ombre look in the center with the belly and the tail. I think that really makes it. And one more thing off subject, but while I have you here, I had to mention something really exciting that is coming up in August 16th through the 20th. I am going to be part of the Rebecca Page Papercraft Summit. It's an online paper crafting event. Over 40 different paper crafters together are sharing exclusive videos. You can sign up for access for free to watch that week. You can sign up. There is going to be a link in the description box below this video. Once you sign up for the summit, you can also choose the VIP option. That is a paid option, but you get some extra bonuses, and you also get to have access to the videos forever. You don't have to try to only watch them during the week. So another great choice. That's what I'm personally going to be doing, because I know I will not have time to watch everything that I'm going to want to watch in those few days. So I hope I'll see you there. Don't forget, the videos are exclusive, so I'm going to be sharing something I have not shared on any of my channel or my website, and you'll get it just in time for fall. But back to seahorses. If you have any questions about this project, leave them in the comments. I will be sharing in the description box all the links I mentioned and any supplies you might need. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Bye-bye.